Hello and welcome to my first video of 2018. I hope you all had good Christmases and New Year's. To hopefully add to that, I've got a bit of a surprise for you for this first video. I've been talking to Games Workshop and they've sent me a review copy of the new plastic Great Unclean One. So I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to show you how to paint a large model using techniques that I've already kind of gone over for the small scale things, but this time it'll be painting a much bigger fleshy model quite quickly as well. For this first video I'm going to be painting the hood that goes on the model. I've built it as the special character. I think it's called Rotigus, and I did that specifically so that I could show you how to paint some of the different things on it. There are three versions of building the model, so I've chosen that one. You can see it on the screen now. He also comes with a nice staff which has all sorts of little interesting things on, so hopefully you'll enjoy my choice. I showed you the paints at the beginning. For this stage of the video I'm actually only using 4 colours. Now on the palette there you can see 4, but that one on the left that's a bit spread out, that's an old colour, you can ignore that. There's actually 3 colours, and the middle grey colour has been made up of 2 others mixed together, which were Skavenblight Dinge and Ice Yellow from Vallejo. So that gives it that nice warm colour. The other 2 colours are black leather from scale 75. I'm applying that at the moment, and the final colour is Celestra grey from Games Workshop. That will be towards the end of the video. But the scale 75 in particular I picked it's because it has a very nice matte finish. I'm applying it there, you can see very roughly. The brush that I'm using is a Series 7 size 2 miniature brush. Normally I would recommend to stay away from these brushes. The miniature brushes have very short hairs. They're not really meant for model painting. It sounds stupid if I was going to say miniature painting, but they're for different things. So if you want to buy Series 7 brushes, stick to the standard Series 7 brushes. But I made the mistake of buying this quite a long time ago, and I needed a use for it, so I kind of use it like a rough brush for stippling and dry brushing and stuff like that. It's a bit expensive to do that with these sort of brushes, but you know, I had it, so I might as well use it. The idea is I'm using this to cover most of the black that's already painted onto the hood. The black that I've used was Vallejo model colour black. I've mentioned it many times before, it's my favourite black colour. But it doesn't really matter too much which black you use, as long as because it's just for the base colour. You're covering most of it with the black leather from scale 75. However, you are leaving, but you're doing it roughly because you want that kind of textured look. So what you can see now is that I'm adding the mixed paint in the middle, which was the Skavenblight Dinge and the Ice Yellow. Now I didn't clean the brush off when I did this, so it still had some of the black leather on. And what this means is that you're kind of mixing on the model as you're scrubbing the paint on. I'm still doing it very quickly and roughly. I want that texture there because I want it to look really worn and old. This is kind of the base texture work, because I will be painting more texture on top of this. But this is a very quick and easy way to get lots of texture down. If you just wanted to do this for a quick tabletop model, you could just leave it at this stage if you wanted. There are a few other things that I'm going to do that you might want to just take it a bit further, particularly some glazing towards the end to add a bit of colour to it, because although it has the black and the warm grey, and the black leather is actually a dark desaturated purple, it still looks a bit black and white, which I feel like once some material's been on a Great Unclean One for a while, it probably would be fairly dirty. So what you can see here is I'm using more of that mixture colour, and I'm just really scrubbing it on, just abusing the brush basically. So if you just use an old brush to achieve this, you can see also that I dipped a bit more of the brush into the black leather again, keeping it mixed in. The black leather actually has had no water added to it, that's straight from the tube. The middle mixture colour, the warm grey, has a bit of water added to it because that was very thick, but I do want that thickness to the paint so that it's easy to get these marks down, make it look rough. If you had it watered down, what would happen is it would it still end up being a bit smooth, whereas this is kind of a quick way of almost dry brushing, but really taking the worst aspects of dry brushing to get the texture effect down. I mean, you can see it looks really quite rough with how I've done it, but the layers as I add them will blend things together and make it look more refined. And also, as you see, I just added a bit more of the black leather into the mix. I don't think I've actually cleaned the brush once yet at this stage, so I'll just keep dabbing it between the colours and scrubbing it on and mixing them on the model. And you can already see it looks sort of worn and cloth-like. It's also quite a quick method to achieve. So what happened there was I just carried on a little bit further and finished it off some more of the grey all over the hood, because I didn't think it was worth showing you just doing the same thing for a long period. So what I'm doing now is using the mid colour again, that Skavenblight Dinge and Ice Yellow mixture, which is around about 50-50. As long as you have, the mixture, as long as the tone is somewhere in between the black leather and the Celestra grey, it'll be fine. So I'm just using that mixture. I'm picking out details now. The main details will be the edges of things to make them look even more worn and catch the light, things like that. And also I will be adding some texture detail, which is all going to be hand painted. This is where it gets a little bit more complicated, and if you are interested in doing more display level type painting, this will be quite boring. So you may want to just pick out some of these small edges, like the bottom, or going around the holes that go through the hood and things like that, just quickly with the mid-tone, and that will be fine again for a tabletop standard model. So as I said, I'm picking out some details and I'm going to start adding some textures in. You can see the paint, it is still thick, although I did say I added some water to this mixture. Because I'm going to be painting in the details, I don't want the paint that thin. I wanted to make a very positive mark with the brush. The actual brush that I'm using here is a test brush that I'm having. It's going to be a brush made specifically for me, so I can't really tell you exactly what it is. It is a size 2 brush though. But I'll tell you more about these new brushes that I'm doing as and when they get done. So the textures that I'm adding here, they're kind of very rough horizontal marks going down the folds in the hood, and you'll see as I do more of these marks and things how it just makes it look a little bit kind of cracked and folded and things like that. Just if you look at how black leather and things, how it can get worn, but also it's just to add it to make it more interesting. So some of these marks are exaggerated or just to make it look interesting on the model. I basically want it to be a really heavily textured piece of material to differentiate it from the flesh, which is going to be fairly smooth. once I actually finish it, although in the photograph at the minute it's a bit rough because I've only just started doing it. But the nice thing about this kind of texture is you can do it quickly and roughly. This whole video to do this this bit of cloth, which is actually a fairly large piece of cloth, is only just over half an hour long, maybe 35 minutes or so. And although I did some of the extra cloth work, so it's just this side really that you're seeing, is still for a fairly well finished piece. By the end of it, it's not that much work. So if you notice, the marks I'm making, I'm using just the tip of the brush, and as I mentioned, the paint is thicker, so using just the tip of the brush and thicker paint, you have to be careful not to make to push too hard. If you use more of the brush, the mark will be very thick. That's why you have to use just the tip. So just doing these quick, they're kind of like almost cross-hatching and blending things together, but also just making random marks as well. So going over some of the marks, it blends in the black leather mixture to the base black. It blends in the the grey and ice yellow mixture. Excuse me, that I'd scrubbed on with the Series 7 size 2 miniature brush. And you can still see these marks over the top of that. It's the same colour paint, but because of how it was applied, the application with the size 2 miniature brush gives it sort of transparency because it was scrubbed on. You can kind of see the black leather underneath showing through and things like that. Whereas because the paint is thick now and applied in a more focused way with the tiny marks, they are a more positive mark on the model. So it's kind of like subtle detail that you're adding. So even though you're using the same colour, it's still more prominent on the model. By this stage you can already see the texture is starting to build up now. I want the long strand that goes down through the model just to be that little bit more faded and more worn, because the way that I picture it is that originally the hood must have been more complete. You can see all the tattered edges of the hood as it goes down, so I'm getting bits have worn off over time, and it's just that long strip that's remaining of what would have been a fairly long hood. What this also means, though, is that these textures have to be even more pronounced on that more worn area, because that will then, although I scrubbed on the lighter colour more thoroughly on this bottom stage. Oh, and there was a little mistake. You saw I actually pushed too hard on the brush and made a very thick line. I just rubbed it off with my finger straight away. Because this is all kind of texture work, it doesn't matter if you get some effects like that. So don't be shy to just go crazy with the brush. I mean, try and be controlled, but don't worry about making mistakes because they can probably be adapted to the effects that you're looking for. So again, as applying these textures, pay extra attention to the edges of materials because that's where things would be worn more as they've been frayed away. So I'm going to be doing some more videos specifically for this model. You're going to see the tentacles. I'm going to make them quite different to the previous tentacles I've painted for Nurgle. They look pink now, but I'm thinking of pink and green stripes, or blended nicely and things like that. So that should be quite interesting. The horns are also going to have a video. They're going to be a slight adaptation for the horns that I've used on other Nurgle models as well. They're still going to be light going into a dark tip, but because there's so much detail sculpted into these horns, they're not going to need all of the lines painted on and things like that. So they should be a bit simpler and allow me to do, well, I'm going to add in some different colours and things just to make it a bit more interesting. for me and for you. And I will also be doing flesh videos just for one, to show you how to paint it on such a large scale, and two, because I'm again going to change some of the colours and things from previous flesh videos. But at the minute I'm painting the belly area, not recording it because I haven't quite finalised the colours I want to do on it yet, and I'm just experimenting a bit to see how it's going to look before I start recording it, so I know what I'm actually doing. There's a lot of flesh area on this model, so there's plenty of space to have a bit of practice. So as you can see, I'm still going along, adding more texture details and things. Although I did start painting the rest of the hood, because I was going to do the whole thing, I decided to actually, for the sake of getting the video completed in time, just focusing on this front area. You could also see there that there is a horn underneath the hood that is like just kind of has been cut off. So that dry brushing scrubbing technique that I used with the size 2 miniature brush as I went over it really helped pick that out. So all sorts of details like that. Lots of people say that dry brushing really shouldn't be used for high level painting, but don't listen to them. It's a valuable tool and can always be adapted to different things. So this is the final, well, no, it's not the final detail stage, but it is the final detail stage of this part, which is using the Celestra Grey from Games Workshop. And this is just, again, same as I was using with the yellow and grey mixture. This time it's just the highest highlight level. So I'm doing all the same things again, picking out detail, but without covering everything that you've done before. Because I'm going to use glazes on top of this, so at the moment, once this is finished, you might think that I've gone a bit too far with the highlights. And the reason for this is that when I add the glazes, everything's going to be toned down. You have to pay attention to this when you're painting things, and be aware that when you add glazes on top of things, whatever you've painted will be much duller. So don't paint things as you want them to be, paint them as you want them to be after they've been glazed. It takes a bit of practice, because when you look at the models you're painting and think, well, that looks terrible, it's too bright, and it's not the effect I want. But you have to plan ahead. But the nice thing with doing this really bright highlight as well, by painting on these details, is it really allows you to pick out the details and things quite clearly. Also, because this is rough, so you're picking out these details, but you want to do it in a kind of rough way. Don't pick out every line, pick out some lines, put dots on, put random dots on things. You'll see me doing all these kind of marks as the video goes along. So some of the marks will highlight marks that are already there. Other ones can be just already in the dark areas and not be connected to other marks. It just adds detail and interest all over the area. In some ways this is just a variation of the red cloaks that I did for the Death Shroud Terminators that were the Golden Demon entry, but this is a slightly more interesting look because I'm not painting freehand on. I can cover the whole area, and because it's a larger model you have to really pay attention to adding a lot more marks on, and whereas on the Death Shroud they had that central area where I wanted to paint the freehand on, so I had to leave that kind of bare and very soft looking, because otherwise the freehand wouldn't work on it. Whereas this, you can go quite crazy with how you want the detail to show through. Obviously, he has some little skulls in this hood that appear to be pinning it to his body. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to paint those as skulls or maybe as metal or what. It's going to be quite a free-form piece, this, as I make my mind up as I go along, because it was quite a surprise that I got the model. I've only had it a few days, so I had to get a move on with what I was going to do with it, so that it's ready. Well, it's not going to be completed, but so there's something to show for the pre-order date, which is today, so the 6th of January. I think well, you have to check on the Games Workshop website. I don't know exactly when it's available, but it's probably only a week or so until it ships, or you can go into a shop and buy it. But because of that, I will be releasing more videos this week as well, so there'll be quite a lot for you to see before you get your hands on the model. So there's plenty to learn and give you some ideas for how you'd want to paint yours. But of course, you can use these same techniques on other models if you like, and they don't even have to be Nova models. This sort of texture work on cloths and things is quite interesting to use on all sorts of different characters. Which is another thing to remember, is with this sort of painting, it's mainly the techniques and the colours and things like that that I'm using. Just because I'm using it on certain models doesn't mean to say you can't use these techniques any way you want on any model you want. It's just a case of adapting them. It's not that they're science fiction models or fantasy models or things like that. There's no reason why a fantasy model or a science fiction model wouldn't have the same sort of textures and things on. So you can see I'm still using the highlight, the final highlight colour to pick out all the details. I'm not using pure white as a final highlight again. I've mentioned this before, but if you start taking everything up to pure white, you've got nowhere to go for the highest areas on the model. So if I want there to be light catching the model on the upper arms or the top tips of the horns or anything like that, if I've used pure white on this hood or even on the belly in areas, it's going to be very hard to make it brighter than that. So you have to kind of trick the eye. So the contrast is already quite high. It looks really light with using this grey already, but if I put white on there, it would just be really bright, and that's purely because of the contrast with using straight black in the shadows. That also means that because some of the lower down areas, like around underneath the belly, they're going to be really dark. That also allows me to use reflected light and highlights that are only that are also quite dark colours. It makes the model more interesting. So you can use that to focus your view. Well, make the person looking at the model focus on things like where the light's hitting, and then they can look around the model in other areas and catch more details as they go around, rather than having everything highlighted up to white. And then it doesn't look natural. There's no drama to the piece, and it's just a boring way to paint, really. So the main thing there that I'm saying is just don't highlight everything to white. That's particularly true of colours like red as well. There's all sorts of ways of highlighting red. Sometimes you can use red and just go straight to white, like a light catching a shiny surface. If you look at things like red cars, you don't really get much in the way of yellows and pinks or anything like that. It's just a red car with shiny white or sky colour reflections. So whatever colour the sky is, that's the colour of the highlight on the car. Or rather, whatever colour the light in the sky is. Or if you're doing cloth, it depends if it's like a yellow, red, or things like that. Worn, if it's worn, it can be pinky. All sorts of things. So don't just go for white. But also, in some cases, you can use white tiling. So again here, this is the slowest part of the painting for the hood, and it makes the least visual impact. The early stages were much quicker and it was easy to see changes as you go along. This stage is more fine-tuning, and it's for close-up viewing of the model. You're not going to notice a difference with this if you're 2 or 3 feet away and putting it on the tabletop. This is purely so that you can pick up the model and look at it closely and think, oh, that's some nice detail or whatever. And it's just refining the texture marks that you've already painted on. And as I said, because I wanted this bottom section of the hood to be more worn, it already had more marks on from the previous texture effects, so these texture effects then have to be highlighted as well. You can see here I'm again picking out some edges of this strip on the hood. You may have noticed there that I was using the side of the brush. There wasn't much paint on it. That's basically how you do edge highlighting if you want a quick sharp effect. It's good on things like tanks with long straight edges. So you just use a fairly thick paint, you load up the brush, rub it off so that it doesn't blob when the brush touches the model, and then run the paint down the edge. And again, this works better with slightly thicker paint. I've mentioned it quite a few times, but it's hard to give exact mixtures of paint to water or whatever medium you want. I generally just use water. I don't see the point in using other mediums, but because each pot of paint is different, some can be runnier or thicker or whatever, it's just a case of getting the consistency that you want for the job you're doing. And in relation to that, here I'm going to show you again how to make a glaze from the colours. So I'm going to be using Mournfang black, brown, and Coat d'Arms black. I've said it before, but you don't have to use Coat d'Arms paints. They're almost the same sort of stuff as P3 or Games Workshop. Those 3 paint companies are very interchangeable with the type of paint that you get. It's just a case of picking which colours you like. And all I'm doing is just taking some paint from the pots. It's a small amount of paint because I'm not doing that much glazing, and then I just keep adding drops of water. And you see it's quite a few drops. That last one was a fairly sizable amount of water. And you can just see that it's just it's dirty coloured water. So we're back to the Great Unclean One again. And now you can see the well palette for the glazing. The reason I use a well palette is because I can get more paint in there and it won't run all over my wet palette. Some people use their wet palettes for glazing, but I prefer to keep them separate. So to use the glaze, there is a video specifically for glazing. If you look at some of the other videos that I've done, there is one specific video on how to use glazing. But the general idea is that you load up the brush with the paint, you run it on a paper towel or kitchen towel or whatever it is that you're using until there's hardly any paint coming off the brush. The brush will still be wet, and then when you apply it, it leaves a very light tint on the model. It dries quickly and it allows you to do layers quickly as well, and you build these layers up, and the effect is used, or the technique is used for different effects. Sometimes it's used for perfect transitions. If you look at Gareth Nicholas's work, he does really perfect smooth transitions using his nickname or online name is Glazed Over, and it's because he does lots and lots of glazing. In this case, I'm using it to add a small amount of colour to the model in the form of the Mournfang brown, and I'm using the coat d'arms black, which again I think it's Abdon black that Games Workshop make, something like that anyway. But they're both very similar finishes on the paint, and it's kind of a little bit satiny, and that works nicely with the leather because I'm going to use it in the shadows, the black. You can see that I'm going to, so it'll pull together some of these textures, dull them down, but also increase the shadow effect, which will then, because I'm not covering the whole of the area, so it's that scale 75 black leather, which is a very matte finish, will be still more visible towards the edges where it's all worn and things like that. And so you'll get a bit of contrast on the piece between the worn, faded matte and the more shiny, shadowy areas that are folded over. And then that's mixed in again, like I said, with the Mournfang brown to make it look a bit dirty and grotty, and just to make it look a bit interesting as well. Now, one thing that I don't actually cover in this video, which I regret now, but I'll post a picture on Patreon as well, so you can see the effect afterwards, is that after all the glazing is done, I then go over again with the Celestra grey and just pick out the odd one or two details, because by the time you finished glazing, some of the quite a lot of the details on the piece are then faded down, but you may just find that you want some pieces to still stand out. You don't want to spend a long time with using a Celestra grey, but you do want to pick out just the odd one or two details to make them pop out a bit more and make it interesting, rather than having the whole thing dulled down. With the Mournfang brown, I'm particularly focusing on the darker areas as well, because that it will contrast nicely against the black right next to them, so it makes it look like there's dirt hiding in these crevices as well. can see again, I'm actually applying the paint a little bit differently to how I usually suggest you do glazes, and that's because I want it to still look rough. The whole effect that I'm looking for with this grotty leather cloth type material is that I want it to look dirty and scuffed. So it doesn't really matter if I damage some of the paint application with the glazing. It doesn't have to be a perfectly smooth glaze or things like that. I could even apply it a bit runny in places so there's pooling and all sorts of things, get some water stains on it. It just adds to the overall dirty effect. You can also see now the contrast compared to the area where I've been glazing, adding the black and the Mournfang brown compared to the top of the hood, which is still just at the early stage with the black leather and some of the yellow and grey mixture just kind of scrubbed on. You can see how these glazes have now dulled it right down and made it a much more interesting colour, or range of colours rather. Right, so we're coming up to the end of the video now. I hope you found this interesting and that you enjoyed the new Great Unclean One model. There will be some more videos very shortly, so I hope you look forward to them. Thank you.